Good morning. Happy Sunday, Mosaic. February 12th, I think, right around the corner from Valentine's Day. Thanks again to my liturgist. I don't think it is Judy this week. I can't remember, but thank you to introduce me. Judy did share the love, though, for my sermon a couple weeks ago, and I want to share the love back to you guys. I'm grateful. I'm so grateful to be a part of your tribe, of your family. What a gift to feel like you get to be on the same path with some others. You're headed towards the same dreams. And this month, our focus and our worship and in our work is on the dream of nonviolence. And this morning, I want us to sort of think about and look at the origins of so much of human violence, especially religious violence, as well as this hopeful promise for our work in nonviolence. I've been dating my amazing girlfriend, Jo. You guys will meet at some time, I'm sure, when we see you all in person. We've been dating for a while, and at some point in the last year and a half or two that we've been dating, I gave a version of this sermon. I was preaching on a piece of this text, and I was giving this sermon to this great Presbyterian church, very progressive. And after this whole sermon, my non-English, she speaks great English, but English was not her first language. She's from Puerto Rico. She at the end of the sermon, she goes, "What's a scapegoat?" And so I want to start with that because that's crucial. The name of the sermon was The End of the Scapegoat. So what's a scapegoat? We're going to start there. The scapegoat is someone who gets blamed for the group's problems. Someone who gets blamed for the group's problems. That's a simple way. Here's another simple way, maybe a little more complex. The big group claims to be right. They say the minority of the individual is wrong, and then they judge them. So the big group claims to be right. They say the minority of the individual is wrong, and they judge them. And it could be exclusion, could be death, it could be genocide. But it all starts with this right and wrong, with that judgment, the scapegoat. And so in Nazi Germany, right, the Nazis said if we could just get rid of the Jews, all our problems would be gone. The Hutus said in Rwanda, the Hutus said if we just get rid of the Tutsis, everything would be fine. What are the Republicans saying today? We could just get rid of the Democrats. Everything would be fine, right? The gays. We get rid of critical race theory. and this is not just other people. This is us. I've got scapegoats right now. You guys have a scapegoat right now, right? Maybe one of your friends. Billy, right? If we could just get rid of Billy. Somebody in your family. Old Uncle Lester, right? The CPA at work, my neighborhood association, my boss, my kid, my parent. The source of my problem. Right? The headache. And if I could just get rid of them, right? That person or that group, then all my problems would go away. What's the easiest way to get rid of them? We're right. They're wrong. They're the problem. That's the scapegoat mechanism. Now, I said last time I come from the Christian tradition, like I come from Melbourne, Florida. It's where I'm from. And my best understanding of Jesus is this universal, compassionate embrace that defines your practice of universalism, right? What I'm saying is I think we're furiously agreeing on our theology and practice. So towards the end of Jesus' ministry, he's a religious political zealot. He knows he's going to get killed because he's fomenting revolution. So he starts getting his followers ready for when he's gone. And not just practically, not just politically, but very much spiritually. Now, there are 4 stories. If your background's not the Christian tradition, there are 4 stories in the Bible about the life of Jesus. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are the authors. In this time, in John's story, where Jesus is getting ready to go to his death, this is in the end, it's what's called the farewell discourse. And it's Jesus getting his followers ready for when his death is going to mean sort of the end of his ministry, what comes next. In this farewell discourse ends with Jesus praying for unity. For unity that all people would be one, as he and God are one, right? God in us, we're in God, no division, language, ethnicity, background, religion, sex, race, age. Jesus says in this spirit, they're overcome. In this powerful experience of the unity of all people. My goodness, does that sound like universalism or what? Leading up to this, right? So that's 17. The farewell discourse starts in 14. In 14 and 15, Jesus is saying things that are familiar to us, especially about Jesus. Love one another as I have loved you, right? Which is unconditional. He says his spirit, when he leaves, his spirit will come and continue to empower this kind of unconditional love when he's gone, and we go, okay, yeah, right? We've been hearing this for a couple thousand years. Love your neighbor, love one another. But what about the roots of us not loving each other? Right? Where does all this hate and division come from? Well, the scapegoat system. It's what we do to each other when we're afraid. Try this with me. We were wrong. You have to say it where you are alone in your own home. We were wrong. If we were together, we'd all be saying it in unison together. We were wrong, right? We're not saying I was wrong. We're saying we were wrong. We as a community, we're what would we call this? Confession. We were wrong. That's the practice, actually. That's the spiritual practice. And really, whatever the subject of the sermon, whatever the religion, whatever the spiritual path, whatever the philosophy or life hack, if we can't get to the point of saying we were wrong, there's not much hope. We have to begin with this humility. We have to begin with this openness. We must practice, model, and experience this ourselves if we ever expect to hope it from those with whom we disagree, right? We can't even do this with one another, and we expect people we don't agree with to do this with us. Suffice it to say, I would encourage you to read the Bible through the lens of Jesus' message of unconditional belonging and transformative love, right? The presence and the coming of this kingdom in which Jesus understood all people, especially the outcast, the shunned, the excluded, the rejected, coerced, co-opted, corrupted, and otherwise marginalized, to have a seat at an open table. We'll come back to that, because how, with the beginnings of that open table, how have we seen so many less than loving outcomes as the fruit even of the church? What's the deeper root? Where's the ground of this sickness and toxicity? And not only within religion, right? We've seen this all over. The heart of the matter is this: the world, humanity's way of bringing peace is a lie. And still this very day, it resists God's way, a loving way, a more compassionate way, a humane way of making peace. The world's way of keeping peace is by division. Separation, maybe you've heard of it. Maybe you've been tuning into the news. Jesus' way of making peace is by connectedness, unity, wholeness. Right? One way is purity. The other way is compassion. Before Jesus prays for us to be one, to be whole, to be united, he speaks to the reason we're not. And he says, I'm going to go away, and the Spirit is going to come and continue to empower you. And he goes on, but very truly I tell you, it is for your own good that I am going away. This is John 16, farewell discourse. It's for your good that I'm going away, he says. Unless I go away, the advocate, it's a name of the Spirit, another specific name, we'll talk about why. The advocate, or the Spirit, will not come to you unless I go away, he says. But if I go, I will send her to you. When she comes, she will prove the world to be in the wrong about sin and righteousness and judgment. When she comes, she will prove the world to be in the wrong about sin and righteousness and judgment. The Spirit, Jesus says, right? The Spirit, by the way, this is the personification of what God is up to in the world, right? The Spirit. And God has plenty of other options about what to be up to in the world, right? Historically, biblically, God could speak through a prophet. God could wage a war, commission an ark, do a crusade, flood the world, build a hospital, more tablets and commandments. But no, this is what, according to Jesus of Nazareth, now the Christ of the Christian tradition's deepest faith, according to this Christ, this is what the Spirit of the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob is now up to in the world, which means, by the way, this is the job of the church in the modern world. Are you ready for it? This is what the Spirit is up to. This is what the church is about. I hope you're sitting down. The Spirit will prove the world to be in the wrong about sin and righteousness and judgment. That's what the Spirit's doing. The Spirit will prove the world to be in the wrong about sin and righteousness and judgment. Now, Jesus, at this point, he's about to go on trial and be accused of sin by those who hypocritically assume their own righteousness. And then he's judged guilty, punishable by death, affirmed by a jury of his peers. In other words, his own being wrongly judged as sinful by a self-righteous system, that on its own, it proves the world to be wrong about sin and righteousness and judgment. And the point of all of this for us is God's verdict on our judgment goes beyond, I believe, this one instance of wrongly judging Jesus, right? It's not only the sin and righteousness and judgment around Jesus specifically, which lands him on the cross. This is an important part of our tradition. The work of the Spirit's much larger than showing the world they were wrong about Jesus, right? Gandhi already said that. We've already heard this. The problem with Christians is they're nothing like their Christ. My friend Steve-O says, Jesus isn't the asshole everybody thinks he is. Sure, we know we were wrong about Jesus, right? He got hung on a cross. He was a good dude. But his point is not to show the world they were wrong about him, but to show the world they were wrong about sin and righteousness and judgment. Wrong about the whole system. Wrong about right and wrong. Right? Jesus is talking about our age-old human way of keeping peace. Keeping peace. And you recognize this by the word uniformity. Right? We all become like one another, so no one's uncomfortable. Keeping peace, uniformity. Richard Rohr, one of the fathers of my kind of mystical spiritual tradition, he says this: in his execution by the state and religious authorities, Jesus became the scapegoat so that we might see that all the key ways for human beings to keep peace in a community involve a scapegoating process where the majority can see itself as righteous by accusing the minority or one person of sin and then carrying out a judgment against them. Sin, righteousness, judgment. It's the basis for our religion, for our law, for our economics. And what's the logical conclusion of those three things? Religion, law, and economics. That's right, war. War. It's the basis for our best attempt at a way to live in peace. And while those ways may work for a while, and only ever then for the wealthy and powerful few, that kind of peace created can never last. Can never last because it is not actually unity. It is uniformity masquerading. It's a superficial fitting in that demands at gunpoint an impossible purity and which falls apart as soon as someone doesn't fit in. Race, sex, religion, ability, age, country of origin, political party, gender, dog or cat. I mean, here's the tragedy. How's uniformity achieved? How's uniformity achieved? What does Father Rohr say? All the key human ways of keeping peace involve scapegoating. Uniformity is achieved by scapegoating. I mean, just look at slavery, apartheid, Nazi Germany, the Rwandan genocide, white Christian nationalism, sin, righteousness, and judgment. Sin, righteousness, and judgment. One after the other, one after the other, one after the other. What is it? It's a scapegoat system. Jesus says to his followers, the system tries to keep unity by dividing us into righteous and unrighteous, clean and unclean, sinner and saint, believer and non-believer, Roman and Jew. Here's the thing. Here's the sermon. Make sure you catch this. It's not that the system is wrong, right? About who's pure and impure. Like, oh, we thought being gay was wrong and we were wrong that being gay was wrong. That's also true. But Jesus says what the Spirit is showing us is not just that being gay is actually okay, but that whole system of sin and righteousness and judgment that rejected and subjugated and excluded and hated a group of people for 50 years. It's not enough to go, oh, we were wrong, but like that whole system that can do that is wrong. Jesus refuses to play that game. He speaks to anyone, anywhere. He opens his table without condition. He calls those rejected by the system that is to follow him into the practice, not just the dream, but the practice of a world that could be. He calls it the kingdom of God, not a new religion that endlessly redefines sin, righteousness, and judgment to best fit the majority in power, but one that does away with that whole toxic system. Not a system with a new and a better and a more fully sacrificial or transactional scapegoat, to atone for our sin, but the call to spiritual formation, enlightenment, is a call to sacrifice the scapegoat system itself every day, to lay down every cultural condition that we have, every bias in our awareness that tells us to separate and categorize and judge and exclude and purify. This will take us our entire lives. But you can choose to stop playing this game today. Now, the next time that insidious impulse grabs you to judge, to stand in a place of righteousness, to look at someone else's sin rather than looking in the mirror. Remember, it's not about redefining sin. It's about revealing and disarming and humbly walking away from this binary, toxic system. Refusing to play. Right and wrong, black and white, good and bad, in and out. Jesus says the work of the Spirit is to convict us that we were wrong about the very nature of right and wrong. We were wrong about this whole divisive, dualistic system, and it is the source of so much violence. Rohr writes about religion: when religion does not move people to the mystical or the non-dual level of consciousness, that allows us to see more than just me or you, us or them. When religion does not move people to the mystical or non-dual level of consciousness, it is more a part of the problem than any solution whatsoever. It solidifies anger. It creates enemies. It is almost always exclusionary of the most recent definition of sinner. Who's next, right? That's the question. That's the scapegoat mechanism. That's the source of violence. He goes on, he says, at this level of scapegoat religion, it's largely incapable of its supreme task of healing, reconciling, forgiving, and peacemaking. When religion doesn't give people an inner life of real prayer, it's missing its primary vocation. Jesus comes rejecting the scapegoat system to such an extent that he's killed by it. In this prophetic act, he reveals not only the wrongness of and injustice and inhumanity of the scapegoat system, but then in the story of the Christian resurrection, we're assured of the ultimate impotence of the scapegoat system, right? The story of the Christian tradition is it killed him, and even that judgment didn't work, right? 2,000 years later, Christians are still gathering and proclaiming he lives. And what they're saying is this, hear the big message: not only is the scapegoat system wrong, it doesn't work. It has no ultimate power. It creates no ultimate meaning. Obviously, 2,000 years later, so much has gone wrong. Many who profess to follow in Christ still cling to the old ways alone. A few weeks ago, Monday was Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and 2 days later, our governor committed to not allowing schools to teach African American history. Far too often, we find the state and our systems, and especially religion, at the heart of that scapegoat system. More gainfully employed in naming, evaluating, specifying, and weaponizing sin, celebrating its own righteousness, and distributing so much judgment as the world so as to put the devil or the accuser character out of business. Right? How are people supposed to feel accused by the devil or by religion when it's so difficult to even live or move in our world without feeling like everything we do is saturated in this scapegoat culture? Right? The scapegoat religion that we live in has become more violent than any god in any sacred text. Right? We've got social media now. God, we've got the news media. We have political cycles. We've got hate groups. We don't need the gods to be violent anymore. We've perfected scapegoat culture all on our own. But here we have Jesus living with a seemingly effortless lack of concern about this fragile system. And the place, like I said, where I always see it is at his meal practice. This would have been a spectacle. It would have been laughable to the scapegoat purity culture of his day. He was often at a table filled with these cultural prime examples of those scapegoated by the existing majorities, tribes, politicians, parties, and alike. He sat and ate with Simon the Zealot, a violent nationalist, Matthew the tax collector, a financial predator, successful sex workers, God bless them, wealthy women, patrons, Romans, collaborators, extremists. Jesus' table becomes a microcosm of the new world, a table that's big enough, right? How big is it? It's big enough. Scapegoating sets a table of sin, righteousness, and judgment, which serves only to threaten, exclude, divide, and shame. Jesus sets a table open to all people, without accusation, without self-righteousness, without judgment. Hospitality, humility, grace. At the table, they find common language in the meal, common ground in their hunger and their need, common desire for a life worth living, revealed right in this life that we already have. This is the way. This is the movement. This has been so obscured by the familiar scapegoating system of our history. And what is the end of the scapegoat system? Like, what's the point? What does it produce? We said it's ultimately powerless. It's ultimately meaningless. So what does the scapegoat system produce but violence? That tends to be its primary product. The end of the scapegoat system is hurt and division. It's injustice and violence. And our call this morning then is to end the scapegoat system by our refusal to practice it. And our commitment again this week to a more just and compassionate way. May it be so with us. I pray that it is so with you. Amen. Peace.